ever just completely lose it over something small,
Oh, yeah.
like something that, in hindsight, isn't even that big of a deal.
Totally.
Maybe a coworker makes a little comment about your presentation, not even mean-spirited,
Good.
just an observation.
Yeah, yeah.
And suddenly you're ready to launch into a full-blown defense. It
Yeah.
feels like a total overreaction.
It does.
And you're left there thinking, like, whoa, where did that come from?
Absolutely.
Well, you might be surprised to know those seemingly out-of-nowhere reactions. They often stem from something called emotional triggers. And today, we're taking a deep dive into, all things triggers,
Okay.
so you can understand your own emotional landscape a little better.
I find it fascinating, really, how these emotional triggers operate. They're like these hidden buttons, you know, pushing us into reactions that feel disproportionate to the present situation.
Yeah.
And what we're experiencing in those moments is really a resurgence of feelings that are rooted in our past experiences.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of something I read in one of the articles you shared. It talked about how our early relationships, especially with our caregivers, can be a major factor in shaping our emotional patterns. It's like those early experiences, they kind of create a blueprint, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Think about it this way. Someone who grows up receiving constant criticism, they might just be way more sensitive to any feedback at all,
Right.
even if it's meant to be helpful.
Yeah.
It's not about the feedback itself. It's more about the echo of those past experiences.
So someone who constantly heard, "you're not good enough" as a child might find themselves like bristling at the slightest suggestion for improvement at work.
Precisely. Their emotional system, it learned to protect them from that familiar hurt, so it kind of jumps into overdrive, interpreting even neutral feedback as a threat.
Sure.
It's a self-preservation mechanism, even if it doesn't quite fit the current situation. And it's not just, criticism. Let's say someone experiences a really painful betrayal early on, right?
Right.
They might find themselves really struggling with trust
Yeah.
and vulnerability in their present-day relationships,
Mhm.
even if those relationships are healthy and secure.
Totally. Yeah. It's like they're trapped in this like emotional time machine.
Right.
Like that past hurt is like being replayed in the present moment,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't, logically belong there.
That's a powerful way to put it. Our emotional system, it doesn't always follow logic, right?
Right.
It's working with the information it has. And
Yeah.
sometimes that information is, well, outdated,
Mm-hmm.
which is why recognizing your own triggers is so crucial.
So, okay. How do we do that? How do we like hit the brakes on that emotional time machine
Right.
before it takes us on an unwanted trip?
One of the first steps is learning to kind of tune into our bodies.
Okay.
The source material really emphasizes paying attention to those physical sensations that arise, when you're triggered.
Mm-hmm.
That racing heart,
Yeah.
that tightness in your chest,
Sure.
even a wave of heat. Those are signals.
Interesting.
They're letting you know something deeper is going on.
Okay, so let's say you're in a situation and you start to feel those physical signs. What's next? Do you try to, like, ignore them?
Ignoring them, it might not be the most helpful approach.
Okay.
Remember, those sensations they're trying to tell you something.
Okay.
A more effective way to deal with them is to just pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, like, what am I really feeling here?
Yeah.
And what does this remind me of?
So if we use that example from earlier about, the coworker's feedback, instead of immediately getting defensive,
Right.
you're suggesting that we take a moment to kind of check in with ourselves.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the pattern and really understanding where it might be coming from.
Yeah.
Maybe it does bring up genuine feelings of inadequacy from their past.
Right.
And this is another interesting point from the research, sometimes what we think is anger
Yeah.
is actually masking a deeper emotion.
Interesting.
Like fear or hurt.
One of the sources gave a great example of this.
Okay.
It talked about how someone might get incredibly angry when plans are canceled.
Yeah, I remember that.
And on the surface, it seems like they're just, frustrated about the change of plans.
Sure.
But underneath,
Yeah,
it might actually be a fear of abandonment,
precisely.
rearing its head.
And that's why recognizing the trigger is really only the first step.
Okay.
The real work comes in approaching those triggered emotions with self-compassion.
Self-compassion. So we're not saying, like, let ourselves off the hook for overreacting, are we?
Not at all. It's more about recognizing that these reactions, they come from a place of self-protection.
Okay.
Remember that emotional blueprint we were talking about?
Right.
Our reactions, even the ones that, seem kind of out of place now,
Yeah.
they were once our way of navigating difficult emotions, and situations.
Yeah. So instead of judging ourselves for having them, self-compassion is about acknowledging where they come from
Mhm.
and choosing a different path forward.
So how do we actually, like, do that?
Right.
How do we go from feeling totally hijacked by our emotions to choosing a different response?
That's where grounding techniques come in.
Okay.
These techniques are like hitting the pause button on that emotional time machine,
Right. Yeah.
bringing us back to the present moment.
Okay.
One of the simplest and most effective techniques, it's focusing on your breath.
Mm-hmm.
Just taking a few deep breaths, noticing the rise and fall of your chest.
Okay.
Another technique is to kind of engage your senses in the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see around you?
Yeah.
What do you hear?
Right.
What can you smell?
It's like reminding ourselves we're not, back in that childhood classroom or that past relationship.
Mm.
We're here now and we have more choices.
Exactly. And the amazing thing is just recognizing the trigger,
Mhm.
understanding where it comes from, and grounding yourself in the present moment. That in itself is huge progress. It's like you've uncovered this hidden pathway to healing some old wounds.
And a few of the sources you shared mentioned journaling
Oh,
and
yeah.
therapy as helpful tools for further exploration.
Absolutely. Think of journaling as like a way to have a conversation with yourself about these triggers.
Okay.
What situations tend to like set them off?
Right.
What are the underlying emotions? And then therapy that
Mhm.
can provide a really safe, supportive space to kind of unpack those experiences and develop, healthier coping mechanisms. It's a reminder that you don't have to navigate this alone.
I love that because
Yeah.
sometimes just knowing that you're not alone in those struggles
Yeah.
can be like incredibly empowering. One of the things that really struck me in all of this is this idea that these emotional triggers, while they're challenging, they're also opportunities for growth.
Totally.
They're like signposts,
Yeah.
pointing us towards unresolved emotional experiences that are ready to be healed.
I couldn't agree more.
It's like instead of being held back by our pasts, we can use those experiences to create
Yeah.
a more authentic and empowered present.
Well, I think we've done some serious deep diving today on emotional triggers.
We have.
We've explored what they are, how they develop, and, most importantly, how we can start to manage them with
Mhm.
self-compassion and a willingness to understand our own unique stories.
It's been great delving into this with you. Hopefully everyone listening is walking away with a better understanding of their own emotional landscape and feeling empowered to respond to those triggers in a way that aligns with, the person they are today.
I love that.
Remember, you have the power to write your own story.